What happens to a smart city when the digital god dies? In Oakhaven, the future just reached its expiration date. While the elite stand paralyzed by a software deadlock, a ghost from the past is descending into the basement to prove that physics doesn't need a password. It needs a master. They say progress has a price. Usually it's paid by the very people who built the road. Look closely at a town like Oakhaven. On the surface, it's all clean lines, digital convenience, and wireless promises. But look a little lower, down where the rain beats against the rusted metal of the welcome sign, and you'll find a different story. You'll find the remnants of a world that used to rely on bone, muscle, and iron. In a world addicted to digital shortcuts, Arthur Miller still measured time in gears and grit. While the rest of the world looked at a screen to know the hour, Arthur's grease-stained hands could feel it. He could dissect the anatomy of a pocket watch with nothing but a sewing needle and patience. He understood the sharp, rhythmic ticking of a machine that had a soul. To the new world, though, he wasn't a master. He was just a ghost standing in the way of tomorrow. A relic, trash. The kids on their electric scooters, flying through the puddles without a care. They didn't see him. They'd splash him with mud and never even look back to see if he flinched. He never did. Because when you've spent a lifetime shaping steel, a little dirty water doesn't move you. Arthur Miller was a ghost in his own zip code. He'd walk into the local diner, the heavy bell above the door, ringing out a clear brass note, and not a single head would turn. The world had moved on to things that were wireless, seamless, and entirely artificial. They looked right through the man who kept their world from falling apart. The class gap wasn't just about money. It was about memory. The waitress would glide right past Arthur, carrying a pristine oat milk latte to a man in a tailored suit. "Here's your latte, Mr. Mayor," she'd say with a smile. The city kept looking toward the clouds, completely forgetting the ground that held them up. The architects of the future genuinely believed they had finally outsmarted human error. The mayor would sit at his reserved table, laughing loudly, flashily checking his high-priced gold smartwatch. He was a man who believed the world could be governed by lines of code and data streams. He didn't know the weight of a wrench. He didn't want to know. But Arthur knew. He approached the table, his heavy boots thudding against the linoleum. He didn't want a handout. He wanted to give a warning. The mayor didn't even let him speak, raising a dismissive, manicured hand like a stop sign. Arthur spoke anyway. The mayor just patted Arthur's shoulder with a condescending chuckle. "Go fix a toaster, Art. Leave the grid to the computers." They traded the wisdom of the wrench for the comfort of the code. And pride is an exceptionally heavy coat. It keeps you warm right up until you drown. Arthur didn't argue. He just turned, walked out of the diner, and stepped back into the pouring rain. Alone. The first tremors were small. A glitch in the binary. A stutter in the light. Up on the utility poles, the digital street signs began to flicker, their pixels scrambling into chaotic patterns. Wires sparked overhead, spitting angry blue embers into the night sky. There was an irregular, sickly electrical buzzing in the air. The machine was starting to get sick. But Arthur didn't need to look at the sky to know it. In the cab of his old truck, he reached into the glove box and touched his old engineer badge. He remembered a time when a man's word was as solid as the steel he forged. While the city slept, the old guard prepared for the inevitable. In his dimly lit workshop, the screech of metal on a grindstone echoed through the rafters. Arthur was sharpening a heavy-duty wrench. Sparks flew, illuminating the deep lines on his face. He wasn't panicking. He was getting ready. Out in the corporate offices, the workers pointed at their flickering monitors and laughed. They called it a bug. They called it a minor inconvenience. They had so much faith in their invisible network that they couldn't conceive of a world where it wouldn't answer their call. The sky knew what the mayor refused to see. Dark, heavy storm clouds were swirling violently over the town's brand new, fully automated power station. Nature was gathering its strength, and the modern world had no defense against the ancient elements. Arthur wasn't reading a screen, he was reading the heartbeat of the city. In his dark garage, spread out over a wooden workbench, were paper maps, grid maps, heavy physical blueprints drawn with ink that had faded over 50 years. He traced the lines with a stubby pencil, following the veins of copper and iron that ran beneath the asphalt. Deep in the subterranean basements of Oakhaven, the red flags were already waving. A pressure gauge on a massive steam line redlined, its needle vibrating violently. A pipe joint cracked, leaking a high-pitched, deafening hiss of blinding steam. Pressure has a way of finding the cracks that arrogance leaves behind. Arthur drove out to the old substation. He stood before a massive, rusted iron gate, locked tight with heavy chains. Behind the digital curtain lay the rusted truth they tried so desperately to bury. They thought they could just automate the top and ignore the bottom. Meanwhile, at the brand new digital command center, the sirens of celebration were blaring. The mayor was cutting a ribbon, flashing his teeth for the cameras, surrounded by bright lights and applause. Celebrations are always loudest just before the silence. Arthur watched from the shadows. His face was illuminated only by the green, sickening glow of a failing monitor in his truck. He wasn't waiting for an apology. He wasn't waiting for a thank you. He was just waiting for the dark. Inside the server rooms, the acceleration had begun. The system was overclocking. Computer fans whined at maximum capacity, screaming a high-pitched death rattle. The air filled with the toxic smell of burning plastic. The machine was screaming, but no one was listening to the metal. Arthur closed his heavy steel toolkit, pulled his old work cap low over his eyes, and looked out at the town. "Hold on, Oakhaven," he muttered to the empty cab. "It's coming." When the math fails, only the muscle remains. Then came the moment the future died, and the past was the only thing left alive. A massive bolt of lightning split the sky, striking the main digital array. Every streetlight, every billboard, every window in Oakhaven popped and went violently dark. And just like that, the digital god died. The chaos was instant. Total, blinding panic in the dark. People stumbled out of restaurants and bars, desperately holding up their smartphones to light the way. But within seconds, the cellular networks collapsed. The screens went dead. In the void, 10,000 screens became nothing more than cold, black glass. At the command center, the mayor's sophisticated digital keypad flashed a single, mocking red line before going entirely blank. In the absolute blackness of his truck, Arthur flicked an old brass Zippo. The yellow flame erupted, steady and warm, the only real light left in the zip code. He turned the key. The massive V8 engine of his old truck roared to life, its heavy headlights cutting through the pitch black like twin sabers. While the world waited for a reboot, the machine of the past began to hum. Arthur didn't need a GPS. While the city searched for a signal, Arthur searched for a wrench. He plowed through flooded streets, water spraying high into the air, moving with absolute purpose toward the epicenter of the collapse. As he drove, his high beams caught a pathetic sight. The mayor's high-tech, self-driving electric car was dead in a ditch, its electronic doors jammed shut. The cleverest machines are often the first to lose their way. Arthur slammed his truck into park, grabbed his crowbar, and pried the door open, pulling the terrified, hyperventilating mayor from the smoking luxury vehicle. Power isn't found in a battery, Jim. It's found in the hands that know how to help. The mayor looked down at his dead smartwatch, then up at Arthur's grease-stained hands. Suddenly, a lifetime of social status was worth less than a layer of grease. Arthur didn't say a word. He just handed the mayor a heavy iron-cased flashlight. "Hold this," he ordered. The student of the future was finally ready to take a lesson from the past. They reached the old substation, but the electronic security gate was frozen shut, an impenetrable barrier of steel mesh. A locked door is only an obstacle to those who don't have the key. Arthur didn't look for a keypad. He marched to the back of his truck and hauled out a pair of 40-pound industrial bolt cutters. Sometimes you don't need a password. You need 40 pounds of American steel. He threw his weight into the handles. With a violent, echoing snap and a shower of brilliant sparks, the heavy chain links sheared apart. The gate swung open with a heavy, metallic clang against the pavement. The digital barrier fell to the weight of simple physics. They descended, down a cold, concrete staircase, deep into the humid, subterranean belly of the city. Their footsteps echoed off the iron grates. They were going deeper than the wires, down into the very bones of Oakhaven. Arthur swept his flashlight across the room. Giant, dusty turbines from the 1950s sat like sleeping leviathans in the shadows. The ancestors were still here, sleeping under the dust. The mayor panicked. "This junk can't handle the load," he cried. "What the modern eye calls junk, the engineer calls immortal." Arthur ignored him, wiping a thick layer of grime off a solid brass plate. It read, "Main Override." Names were carved in brass long before they were typed in light. He grabbed a massive iron ring on the floor and pulled. A heavy iron hatch groaned open. The path to the heart required more than a click. It required a soul. Suddenly, a side valve ruptured, blasting a wall of superheated steam into the room. The mayor screamed and recoiled, but Arthur didn't even flinch. He walked right through the white haze, his skin burning, his eyes locked on the target. Nature and machine were fighting back, but Arthur spoke their language fluently. Seeing the old man struggle against the pressure, something shifted inside the mayor. He dropped his ego, stepped into the steam, and gripped a jammed secondary wheel alongside Arthur. Survival has a way of turning critics into brothers in arms. Together they threw their weight into it. The wheel spun. They pushed aside a heavy lead door to reveal a hidden inner sanctum. The hidden pulse of Oakhaven was finally within reach. There, illuminated by the beam of a single flashlight, sat the holy grail of the old grid, a massive 50-year-old solid copper master lever. It was the heartbeat of the state, hidden in a basement, waiting for a human hand. But before Arthur could touch it, the beam of tactical lights blinded him. Local law enforcement had broken into the basement, guns drawn, shouting orders. "Step away from the equipment." Fear always speaks first when the lights go out. Behind them, the master lever began to vibrate violently. Sparks showered from the ceiling like standard fireworks. The machine was on the brink of a catastrophic mechanical heart attack. Arthur didn't look at the guns. He pointed directly at the pressure gauge hitting the red zone. "If I don't pull this now, this whole block becomes a crater," he said calmly. He wasn't fighting the law. He was fighting the pressure of a dying city. The lead officer hesitated. He lowered his weapon, his flashlight illuminating Arthur's completely unbothered, resolute face. The officer's light caught the small gold badge pinned to Arthur's grease-stained canvas shirt. It was the crest of a master engineer, a forgotten rank, finally recognized in the hour of total collapse. Arthur stood tall. The mayor and the police officer flanked him now, not as authority figures, but as subordinates, waiting for an order. He didn't just build the foundation. He was the only one left who knew how to keep it from crumbling. Arthur handed the massive wrench to the police officer. "Hold that backup valve," he commanded. The authority of the office was officially traded for the authority of the craft. They all stepped up to the massive, rusted iron lever. Arthur took the lead, his veins bulging in his neck, his knuckles turning white. The weight of 1,000 digital dreams rested on a few inches of rusted iron. Arthur's face turned deep crimson. Sweat and oil dripped from his brow. He threw his entire soul into the metal. "Not today," he roared. The deadlock finally shattered under the weight of 3 generations. The rust cracked like a gunshot, and Arthur slammed the lever down into the on position. A thunderous, grounding electrical crack shook the foundation. A blinding blue arc of light erupted, and a deep, rising mechanical roar filled the room. The gap was closed. The silence of the machine was shattered by the roar of life. Above ground, the city of Oakhaven blinked. Once, twice, and then the street lamps, the storefronts, and the homes glowed with a warm, steady, unbreakable amber light. The ghost had a heartbeat again. Down in the dark, the mayor looked at the calloused, bleeding hands of the man he had dismissed just hours prior. "You saved us," he whispered. He looked at the hands he once mocked and finally saw the master. Digital is the dream that we buy. Analog is the reality that we live. Arthur Miller walked out of the substation, threw his tools into the back of his truck, and drove home into the dawn. He didn't need their applause. He just needed to know the machine was still humming. Oakhaven forgot its past. But the past didn't forget Oakhaven. Never forget who builds the world.